Candid Catholic Convos, a program brought to you by the Catholic Diocese of Harrisburg. Our mission is to humanize the church and help you to grow in your faith, love, and understanding. I'm your host, Rachel Trochet, a cradle Catholic who's only human and struggled with faith on more than one occasion. Each week, you'll hear engaging, down-to-earth interviews and actionable strategies you can implement into your life with ease to help you grow closer to God. If you're ready to open your heart and step fully into the person God created you to be, then you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hello, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Candid Catholic Convos. May is the month for a lot of things. It's the month of Mary, Mother's Day, mental health awareness, and it's the start of summer with Memorial Day. Did you also know it's National Foster Care Awareness Month? There are currently over 407,000 children and youth in foster care. And the month of May is a time to acknowledge foster parents, family members, volunteers, mentors, policymakers, child welfare professionals, and other members of the community who help children and youth in foster care find permanent homes and connections. Today, I'm excited to speak with Gwen Pfeiffer, the Program Director of Catholic Charities, Adoption Services, and Specialized Foster Care, to learn more about this program and how we can get
Gwen,
involved.
thank you so much for coming to the program. I'm really excited to have you here. Would you mind telling me a little bit about yourself and how your faith kind of led you to this position?
Sure. I have been working with children and families in a variety of capacities since I got out of college, which is now a number of years ago. And, I think that I grew up in a family that was very dedicated to service and to helping, the community. And I think over the years, I just continued to, want to help the community and really focus on children and families. So when I went forward and got my degree in social work in my master's program, I focused on children and families and their clinical needs and just really continued that throughout my work. So here we are working in adoption and foster care since 2008 and have had a variety of positions within Catholic Charities, Adoption and Foster Care, and now am the program director. So I oversee both programs, which are, and I know we'll talk about that a little bit more, but which are related. So
that's awesome. So for those who are unaware, like I was, how long has Catholic Charities been involved in adoption and foster care?
So believe it or not, we've been doing adoptions since the 1930s.
Wow.
So it's been quite a while. And then foster care, not until the late 70s, early 80s did we start with foster care. But we do, as you and I were talking before we started, we do have records that we keep for 100 years. That's what the law requires for the adoptions that we do. So our storeroom, our record room is quite full at this point.
That's amazing. I can't believe you have to keep them for 100 years. And the fact that you have enough records going back that far just blows my mind.
Right. Some of the early records are, if younger people won't have any idea what this means, but they are now on microfiche. So back in the days when you had to have the machine and, feed it in.
Like you see in the movies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we actually have a microfiche machine so that we can read some of these older documents.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is incredible. Yeah. So it's called Catholic Charities. Are these services only available to Catholics or are they non-denominational?
Right. So Catholic Charities really provide services to everyone, regardless of their religious faith, their background, or, any of those things. So we do, it really doesn't matter. I know a lot of people do call and say, I'd like to be a foster parent, or, I'd like to look at adoption. But I'm not Catholic, can we still use your services? So of course, it's certainly not limited to those who are Catholic.
That's great. That's something that I think a lot of people don't know, and probably should, because just because Catholic is in the name, I'm sure that there are faith-based aspects to the organization, but it's not, well, if you're not Catholic, then goodbye.
Right. I mean, of course, our motivation is to serve our community, in this case, children in need. So, we look to do that in the best way possible. And, working with different kids and, different families is really, the best approach to making sure it's, the best that we can do.
Absolutely. Can you explain what foster care actually is?
Sure. Yeah. And it does get confusing. A lot of people call me and they want to help, but they're not really sure what any of this stuff means. And there's a lot of details. So foster care, what we do is county children and youth agencies, and every county in Pennsylvania has a children and youth agency. They are charged with the welfare of children. So if they are working with a family, or they are notified of a family that needs assistance, or a child that is being abused or neglected, then they're required, of course, to investigate and see what's going on. In some cases, they need to remove the child or children from the home for their safety. And this is always considered a temporary removal, except in very rare cases. While they assist the family in, in parenting skills and whatever they, might need, drug and alcohol, it just really depends on the situation. So when those children are removed from that home, they are placed into foster care. And some counties still work with their own foster families. In other words, they train and certify foster families and work directly with them. But many counties now don't. And so they contract with affiliates like Catholic Charities in order to, certify families, train families, look after children that are in foster care. And so they will contact us and say, there's a brother and sister pair, we have to remove them, or we have just removed them from their home. Do you have a family that can meet the needs of these children? And so if we do, of course, we, let them know. And then if we don't, then they, continue to look at other foster care agencies, if that makes sense. So that's really in a nutshell, kind of how the foster care program works on a day-to-day basis. And so our motivation is really to continue to work with families in the community and certify families, which is not an easy task for families to kind of, get through all that, but so that we can have as many possible homes that might be a resource to kids that need to come into foster care.
That's fantastic. And I like that Catholic Charities is able to provide a lot of what these families need. And I'm assuming the foster care program is designed to get the children back to their families? That's
correct. So in almost all cases, reunification with their birth families will be the goal. So while the families, the birth parents, probably in most cases, are getting the help that they need, we are also working with the children in tandem with the county children youth agency to provide the services that the children need. So it could, obviously be arranged from, school services to mental health services to, really just good, safe homes with good parenting.
You touched on this a little bit, but how or is this different from government-based programs?
This is really, like I said, we've become contracted with most of the children and youth agencies in our surrounding counties. So we actually work hand in hand with the government when you look at it that way, in order to provide the care to children that is needed when they come into foster care.
So it's not an either or, it's a together.
That's right.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That makes more sense now. Yeah. So how does someone become a foster parent? And you mentioned training and certification. What all is involved?
So that is a good question. And, of course, we always want to encourage families that might be considering ways that they can help, to reach out to us and to think about, sometimes this is a process of thinking about, do I want to do this? Is this right for myself? Is this right for my family? Am I the right person? Those kinds of questions. And we can help families answer that as well if they, are able to contact us. But what they need to do is really just get started in our training program. So we provide upwards of 24 hours. It ends up being around 30 hours of training for families to become certified in as foster parents. And that sounds like a lot, and it is. But I will say, most families, as they go through this, say, oh, it wasn't nearly as bad or as grueling as I imagined it would be when you told me that large number. And I think the reason is because there really is a lot to learn in how the system works, what a family's role might be in, helping. Many of the needs of the children in care, there's so many different issues that they may be confronted with. And we do like to provide as much as we can in terms of, knowledge and resources about some of the things that they might confront. So it's a lot of training, but I will say it's doable. Since the pandemic started, as many different agencies, we had to get creative and start figuring out how we were going to continue to certify families and work with families and kids. So we now provide our training on Zoom. So families can do this in the comfort of their own home, which makes it a little bit easier. We do like to have small group trainings if at all possible. So we try to coordinate, at least a few families to get together to do this. And they can provide, kind of resource for each other too as they go through it. We meet typically, 5 times. There's some additional training that we ask families to complete on their own, at their convenience. So it's really all said and done, not too difficult to get through it. And then, of course, there's some other things that they need, like they need background clearances, just like you do with, helping at church or doing kind of anything these days. So they'll need that. And, just some other items like homeowners or renters insurance, their car information, those types of things they have to provide us. Again, it looks like a long list, and it feels, I think before folks get started, it can feel kind of daunting. But most of our families say, it really isn't as bad as they imagined it would be. And once they're certified, there's really not a lot more that they need to do on that front. Maintain, training hours. And we do provide training most months of the year. And then some additional training that they can do. And, just kind of keep up with some basic paperwork as they move along.
That's awesome. I love that the training is sort of like multifaceted. So like if you need the online version, you can do it through Zoom. You can also have the group settings, which I'm sure provides a lot of support for these families who are probably all going through the same thing and have similar questions.
And the group is really, it's like through Zoom. So we don't, nice. Except for, getting together occasionally, we don't really meet in person. We do as staff, but the foster parents that are in training aren't meeting in person anymore. But most of them say that they like the way, through Zoom and that connection that way.
I was going to say it's probably really convenient.
It is so convenient. And then as they move along, they do get to know one another in the program. And, we're able to link families to provide support for one another and that kind of thing.
Very cool. So switching gears a little bit, what does the adoption process look like, and how does Catholic Charities facilitate adoption?
Yes. So as some people in our diocese may know, our adoption program has really changed quite a bit over the last few years. So we, of course, since, as I mentioned, have been doing infant adoption since the 1930s. So we transitioned out of that a couple of years ago. And, that was a bittersweet change. It was difficult to sort of say goodbye to that after so many years, but we also knew that the primary needs in adoption were the children who are currently in foster care. And some of those will, some of those children will not be able to return home. And in those cases, will need a permanent family. And so that's really the focus. And we knew we needed to kind of focus on that in our adoption program. So that's now what we do. When we have a family that says, look, I'd like to adopt a child, we explain to them what the needs are and, what we do. And so we provide a resource for families to connect with kids who are in need of permanency. And the other side of that is that most of our families will also be foster families and just open to adoption. And that's the bulk of our families. And so if there's a child that is with them that ultimately isn't able to return home, they can then be that permanent resource and adopt. And we do periodically have those situations happen. So we work with the statewide Adoption and Permanency Network, which is some umbrella organization in Pennsylvania that really works on permanency for kids in foster care who need permanency. We can receive, a lot of information through SWAN, as we call the statewide Adoption and Permanency Network. We receive a lot of information on kids that can then be matched to our families, and we can review that and see if those are good matches. On the flip side, families can always look at the children who are on the SWAN portal, or not the SWAN portal, but the exchange. So Adopt PA Kids is where they can go looking for kids who are available. And they can then let us know, look, there's a child on Adopt PA Kids that I'm interested in learning more about. And so then we can go and, talk to their caseworkers and find out some additional information that way. So it sounds kind of complex and convoluted, but it's really not. We do, see our foster care and adoption programs as really working hand in hand, because most of our families, as I said, will be open to foster care and open to adoption at the same time.
That's wonderful. And I love that the state and the organization work very well together. I mean, most times you hear about it, it's very like one side doesn't talk to the other, but it sounds like that they work very nicely together and everybody just kind of finds this groove to do what's best for the child. And I love that.
Yeah, for sure. I would say that SWAN does provide so many trainings for both our staff, our caseworkers, that are in this field, as well as for families. And that's really nice. They have 4 conferences a year, and families are always invited to attend those. Just a lot of resources and a lot of training. I think there's, we're definitely learn every day more and more about the needs of kids and, learning how to find the resources for these kids and the families for these kids. And it's not always a straight line. It's not always, an easy, this child matches wonderfully with this family. Here we go. Their families really just need to be flexible and open. And that's, often can really match with a child in need. And they never would have thought that would have been the child that they would have matched with when they started the process.
Right. God is full of surprises sometimes.
Exactly.
So are there any requirements for potential adoptive families like there were for foster families?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So we really treat our adoptive families and our foster families, as I said, they're typically the same folks, but we treat those requirements the same. So we make sure that when we do what's called a home study, where we, review a family and meet with them and that kind of thing, that we're really getting all the same information regardless. So we take a pretty holistic approach. Again, it does sometimes seem like a lot, but we will definitely hold your hand as you go through this process and try to make it as simple as possible.
Awesome. So there's support wherever.
Absolutely.
Wherever you go
Absolutely. And, I always say to families, email me, call me, let me know if there's a question about any of the things, that we're asking you to do. And when we meet with families to interview them, we, always say, this is really just getting to know you. We're not the old classic kind of social worker, that comes and checks for dust in the house and that kind of thing. We're looking for real families, because every family has its ups and downs, its challenges, and often families that, will have challenges and are able to get through those can be wonderful resources for kids who also have challenges, so they can really relate. So, I'll have families that call me and say, well, we had this issue 15, 20 years ago, would you still let us be part of your program? And of course, depending on the issue, but, I always remind families, if you have been able to succeed and get through, some challenges in your life, then you're probably a really good candidate for some of our kids who really need, parents that have empathy and understand where they're coming from.
Right. You never underestimate the power of empathy. I love that. What if years later, adoptees want to reconnect with their birth family? You mentioned that Catholic Charities holds on to a lot of the records. Mm-hmm. Is there a way for them to get back in touch if everybody's agreeable?
Yeah. So typically nowadays, adoptions are open. Certainly if you adopt from foster care, you're going to have some awareness, background of the birth family. And so I would say most of those kind of adoptions are open, at least to a degree. There's some knowledge, some history that, families do have, and that their children will have access to. We know that it's better for most kids to have that family history and to maintain some degree of contact. There are, of course, some situations in which it's not advisable, but those are pretty rare. And we do have the ability, if, let's say there's a child that was adopted, and we have people call us and email us quite a bit about this, but let's say they were adopted through our infant program, or potentially even through foster care many years ago, before things were as open as they are now, and they want to get records. So they have the ability to do that. And so, they would do what's called a search. We call that a search service. And we do provide that as a service to, adults who were adopted through our diocese. And in addition, in more recent years, we now have the ability, if a birth parent had placed their child for adoption years ago through our infant program and also wanted to, do a search for their child. And a search could mean, look, I just want to get information, or a search could mean I'd like to have some contact with them. We can also provide that service now to birth parents as well. So, I would just encourage people, if they are interested in learning about that, they were adopted through, the Diocese of Harrisburg, or they placed a child through our diocese, just to give me a call, and I will talk them through that process. So some of those cases can be very, very interesting. Finding information or connecting, a birth mother and their child, they can be really interesting situations. And sometimes, people will contact us when they're going through a change in their life. It seems to be pretty common. Maybe they've recently gotten married, or maybe they've recently had a child. All of a sudden, it makes them think about their history in, a bigger, broader way. And so they will contact us and start that process.
That's really cool that service is available, because you think like old school closed adoptions, that there's still a distinction between a closed adoption and an open adoption. Now it seems as though Catholic Charities has moved the direction of they're somewhat open, especially since a lot of the kids are adopted out of foster care. Mm-hmm. But for those before in the infant program, that there's still a way if they choose. That's pretty cool.
That is right. And I mean, I will say sometimes we will search for 6 months or more and are not able to find the relative that they're looking for. But the majority of times we are able to, and at least often start with, here's your family history that we have on file, and we can, share that information.
Right.
Yeah.
Give you a direction to go in. I love that. Where can we learn more about these programs or apply to become a foster parent or an adoptive parent?
So I would say people can go to our website. It's Catholic Charities Harrisburg. So it's cchbg.org, and they can just click on that. It does have our phone number, our contact information, email. They can certainly pick up the phone and give us a call. I think the easiest way that, and I tell people this when they email me, I say, hey, do you have any time to talk on the phone? Because I'm a little bit old school, but I often find that it's much easier to convey some of the complexities of the program or help families figure out, what might be right for them or whether this, could be right for them by talking through some of it and, where they're coming from. A little bit easier than emailing, but certainly, however people want to reach out to us, we'd love to hear from them.
Awesome. And I'm a little bit old school too. I find sometimes it's a lot easier to pick up the phone than it is to send an email.
Right.
If I don't want to become a foster parent or an adoptive parent, but feel called to help somehow, what are some ways that I can get involved?
Yeah, I would say, go to our website. Again, if you're called to donate to our program, that's always, a wonderful gesture. We very much appreciate it and very much, in need of that as well. Or, again, people can call and find out if there are opportunities that we might have, and those might change from time to time in terms of, donating some time or, if there's any particular item that might be in need for a particular, child in the program at that particular time. We certainly would, be happy to have and have had many generous people in our community, do that as well.
I love that. Gwen, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I feel like I learned a lot about this arm of Catholic Charities. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. Our goal at the Diocese of Harrisburg is to walk with you on your faith journey. So if this episode resonated with you in any way, the easiest way to show your appreciation is by sharing this program with your network or by leaving a review on your listening platform. You can also support us financially by making a donation online at hbgdiocese.org/DAC and clicking the Make a Donation button. Thanks again, and we'll see you at church on Sunday.